1 minute until showtime.
There we go. Facebook always goes first.
Okay.
Go live. YouTube.
I keep refreshing your channel, not getting it yet.
There it is.
Okay, yeah, there we are.
Live. Mute it.
And
So they still look yellow, orange on YouTube?
a tiny bit, maybe.
Tiny bit.
More yellow on YouTube.
Saturation. Let's go down. Has to catch up. Okay, is that better?
We'll take a peek here in a sec.
Quality looks suddenly went down. I don't know why. On my YouTube. I don't know about your YouTube.
Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
What am I doing?
Blog Talk Radio.
Hey, everybody. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Yaron. How are you?
You're on an Amy show. I don't know. I'm kind of low on energy today. I think you're going to have to carry the show today because I think I've got a bit of a cold. I lost my voice just before my speech at the blockchain conference.
Wow.
So I think they created a blockchain app for me to get my voice back. So it's better. You know, blockchain can do everything.
I was going to say it could do that too, right? It's the panacea, right?
You can't do with blockchain, it turns out. And what did I do? I worked out this morning, which I haven't done in like 4 months. So I'm like, I just want to go to sleep.
Oh, okay.
All right. What do we want to talk about? So
yeah, I've got this little theme going.
Yeah.
You know, the first couple stories that I've got in the program notes, and again, if people don't know, go to the blog, my blog at don'tletitgo.com, and I lay out program notes for this and my own shows. And the first couple stories, one is that horrible FIU Florida bridge collapse this week. And the other is one that has to do with the quality of education in our country from a certain angle, which has to do with whether or not we're teaching handwriting to kids anymore. And so I was looking at these two stories, and suddenly what came to my mind is this great quotation from Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
The 9 most terrifying words in the English language. I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And so then, of course, I brought in a few others.
I mean, it's sad that those are the most terrifying words, right? Because it shouldn't be, right? They should be there to help. They're our servants. They're there to protect us, protect and serve us.
Right. But as Ayn Rand said,
the
government is the most potential danger to us of any entity. Any entity. So, criminals and even foreign invaders and everything else. No, it's the government that is the most potential threat to us. So it makes sense. It really does. And, so again, those two stories concretely brought this up for me. And then I thought, well, it's great that this brought this up for me because there's a couple things, we've been talking about Trump. There's just no quotation from Trump that would ever come to my mind as, something substantive as a commentary. Can you think of anything from Trump that's been catchy or useful? Or, I've got a Katy Perry song that's more useful to me than anything that Trump has said.
I think the difference between Trump and Reagan is massive. I mean, as much as I'm critical of Reagan, I think Reagan was a missed opportunity. And I think that, and Ayn Rand, of course, didn't vote for Reagan. She refused to vote in that election. I mean, Reagan was a giant as compared to any president since, really. Bush Senior, Bush Jr., Clinton, Obama, or Trump. Reagan was a giant in comparison. So let me just ask: what's the video quality on Facebook? Because when I look at Facebook, the video quality kind of sucks when I'm looking at what's streaming back to me. But I can't tell if that's true on, maybe it's just my feed. So let me know.
Your computers are doing the heavy lifting right now. So
yeah, they're sending everything, and they might be suppressing the incoming video. So hopefully it looks good.
Let me go look at Facebook myself.
Quality is good, they say. Do I look yellow or orange? I'm trying to get the settings right, because what happens in YouTube and Facebook is it mutes the colors. So in Zoom I look orange, but I think that in Facebook it's fine. So anyway,
we women don't mind being desaturated a little, by the way.
You look good. That's why I'm trying to fix the lighting here, because when you put me next to you, it's like it's just a horrible comparison. So I have to look.
Yeah, so I'm looking at the video now on Facebook, and it looks fine. And actually, yeah, I look a little bit pale, I guess, right? So
you're a little pale today. You usually have more color in your cheeks.
Yeah, it could just be the quality of the light or whatever.
Yeah, so I invested a little bit in lighting, so lighting's better. See, yeah, so this all integrated for you into this great theme for today.
Yeah, and there were a couple things too, right? Because I started thinking about the fact that he was so excellent in ridiculing Russia. And imagine if we had him today with all the things that were going on with Russia, what he might say.
Putin would be cowering right now. Putin would be under his desk afraid from Ronald Reagan versus what we have today. Elizabeth, what's her name? May, I forget her first name. May and Trump, pathetic.
Yeah. And I mean, Trump's not even ridiculing Russia, but when Trump does ridicule somebody, like Kim Jong-un or whatever, he does it in such a stupid, juvenile way. Whereas Reagan was so witty, and Reagan would, make fun of the very thing that makes evil in such a clever way. And I miss that.
And what he had also was he made moral judgments, right? Which almost, so Bush did this on occasion because some speechwriter included it in there, but it never came out as believable. His turn the other cheek, compassionate conservatism was dominant. But Reagan could say evil empire, and you believed that he really believed they were an evil empire. And he had this certain moral tinge to his critique of evil regimes that, again, I don't think anybody has had since. Morality is meaningless to most of these people, and for Bush, it was too religiously based to mean anything. In spite of Reagan bringing religion into the Republican Party and anchoring it into the Republican Party, he was not very religious, and he did not govern as a very religious president. That is, and he didn't use religion, as in his communication nowhere near as much as Bush, or even laughingly enough, Trump.
Right. No. And so it just makes me nostalgic. You're really.
Somebody here says, that's why Ayn Rand loved Reagan. No, Ayn Rand hated Reagan, just so we're clear. Ayn Rand didn't vote for Reagan, and Ayn Rand hated Reagan, and justifiably so. She hated him because she believed he would destroy the Republican Party, that he would anchor religion at the center of the Republican Party, bring in the evangelicals. And today I was reading a fascinating article. I still haven't finished it, so I didn't want to bring it up, but a fascinating article I think it's in the Atlantic, about, it's written by an evangelical kind of neocon, about why it is that evangelicals are so enamored and are willing to tolerate anything from Donald Trump. I mean, it is his base. Donald Trump's base is evangelicals. Right. And I'm just getting to the juicy part where he tries to explain it, but it's really fascinating. I recommend it. I mean, Atlantic has some of the best articles out there. It's biased in its many of its people, but many of them are conservatives or even libertarians once in a while, right there. And a lot of the writers are very good and really interesting.
Exactly. No, exactly. So should we get into the actual stories that inspired all of this Reagan talk?
Oh, I wanted to say something about my talk yesterday. So I gave a talk at this blockchain conference. I was talking about this the other day, and I don't know much about blockchain. It seems like a cool technology from everything people tell me. It's probably overblown because it's being hyped up right now. I'm not a big supporter of
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin as a currency. I think it serves other purposes, but as a currency, I don't think it's very meaningful. But the conference was really interesting, and there were about 700 people there, all kinds of people. I mean, some of the weirdest people you've ever seen to mostly normal-looking people who are, obviously very, very smart, all in computer sciences. About 10% of the audience was probably Puerto Rican, people from the government, people from the big banks, people, investment people, and some blockchain people. There seems to be a blockchain community growing up right now around Puerto Rico. So Puerto Rico seems to be becoming this blockchain hub. The Puerto Rican government supposedly is talking to a lot of the blockchain companies to create a regulatory structure that is very friendly to blockchain companies, to encourage blockchain startups. They want to create, I guess, Silicon Island in Puerto Rico,
okay,
centered around blockchain technology. So the conference was actually really interesting. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about blockchain. I'm probably dangerous because I know a little bit about something very, very complex, which makes you dangerous. But it seems like a cool technology for a variety of different uses. I don't think it's a game changer in terms of completely revolutionizing the world, but it's another step in making better tools to make things more efficient. And anyway, I was giving a talk. I was asked to give a talk on how to make Puerto Rico the Hong Kong of the Caribbean. So I gave a talk about the value of free markets. It was short, 20 minutes, and then I took a few questions. And it was cool. And I talked a lot about free markets, a lot about what Hong Kong represents, and a little bit about blockchain. But since I don't know anything about it, I tried not to talk too much about it, not to get myself into trouble.
Did you bring in the stuff about Estonia that you said you had been doing some research?
Brought out some stuff about Estonia.
Okay.
Estonia is pretty cool. I mean, I think a little spooky because all this electronic data is in a sense accessible to the government. So I don't know what the privacy laws are there, and I don't know like how much of a firewall they have between kind of private data and public data and private company data and your data. But it still seems really cool what they're doing and the efficiency that they're creating. They're also in the private sector. So Estonian government is still too involved in the economy, and healthcare is socialized, and it's pretty standard like everywhere else. But
that makes it scary.
But it's still cool, right? What they're doing is still pretty amazing. So I talked a little bit about that, and it was great. I mean, people loved it. I got so many people coming afterwards and saying how much they loved it, and then people telling me, oh yeah, they've read Atlas Shrugged and they love Atlas Shrugged, and Ayn Rand, was a huge influence in their life, and all this stuff. Somebody's asking if Peter Schiff was not at the conference. No, Peter wouldn't have come to the conference. Of course, Peter hates blockchain and claims that all these cyber currencies are just a scam. So I don't think he was invited, and I don't think he would come. But a lot of people, a few people came up and said they knew me. They watched the show and they follow me anyway. And that's always cool when strangers just come up out of nowhere at a conference in the middle of nowhere, do that. But then, a lot of Puerto Rican, nobody from the government came up to me, but a lot of well-connected Puerto Ricans came up and said, hey, are you talking to the governor? Are you talking to the government in Puerto Rico? And I said, I'd love to. Just put me in front of them. And they all promised that that's going to happen. I had 4 executives from the largest bank in Puerto Rico come up to me and, start asking questions. And so who knows? So, this was the first step in the long road of my campaign to become governor of Puerto Rico. But I'm kidding.
So basically you're going to make Puerto Rico into Galt's Gulch is what you're saying.
Well, I'd probably unlikely to be able to do that. Right. And Galt's Gulch, I mean, we need to be very careful because Galt's Gulch, of course, is not a country.
Right.
Always make that mistake. But if I can move Puerto Rico to become more free market, I mean, my goal would be to make Puerto Rico as rich as possible under U.S. law. Right. So make it the freest equivalent of a state and make it the richest it can be under U.S. law, and then announce independence and then take it the next step on. Right. And of course, in the period between no, this is going to go public. This is public, but what the hell? In between making it rich and going public, getting a nuke for self-defense, and then announcing independence, and basically then establishing laissez-faire capitalism in Puerto Rico. That would be nice. Very unlikely. So
basically, you're telling us about the dreams that you had last night, right now.
That's right. I don't dream. I don't remember my dreams. All those who
I doubt you get enough sleep.
My dreams are never coherent enough to have a story like that. But anyway, for all those actually now getting excited by my political campaign, no, it's not going to happen. So, but if I can influence, I will definitely attempt to influence. I really stuck in the talk. I really stuck to economics. I didn't deviate. I didn't make it a philosophical talk in any way. I figured for this audience, that was a good introduction. And then hopefully they will go out and seek out more material to get deeper into the content. But yeah, it was good. I enjoyed it. An interesting group of people.
And the talk that required the least travel for you as well.
Yes. And I didn't charge anything. But now they're talking about doing other conferences around the world, and they want me to be a permanent speaker because I'm good at it. So hopefully now they'll start paying, and I'll start traveling around the world and doing talks at blockchain conferences. I will be the blockchain guru.
You're going to have to learn more about blockchain then.
Blockchain guru. Yeah, I mean, if I start doing this regularly, I'm going to get some of the guys here online, Abatin, who I'm sure I'm pronouncing his name wrong, so I apologize, but who works with blockchain at IBM. I'm gonna hire him to give me tutorials. I
understand that he's launched cyber currencies for both of us.
Yeah, we're talking about doing an ICO, guys, an initial coin offering. So there is real talk to have the Yaron Amy coin, and you'll be able to use the coin for all kind of fun stuff, like getting private time with us, or Q&A, or getting your questions at a higher priority than other questions. So look for the Yaron Amy.
We might have to do something at Ocon or something, right? I figure.
What's that?
We'll have to do something at Ocon.
Yeah, once we launch the ICO, we can figure it out. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So, yeah. Okay. Yeah, if we can he actually sent me a link to this company that makes it really easy and really cheap to issue these coins. So
he's an enabler.
Yeah. I told him that if he's willing to manage the whole thing and own it, we'll do it. So I haven't heard back from him. Once I shifted the responsibility to him, never heard back. So we'll see.
Oh God, I might have to dive in because I don't have enough going on in my life right now. Okay, so let's talk about this horrific bridge collapse, if you're okay with that. I don't know. Have you looked into it at all this week? Because
not a lot. I mean, I wasn't reading much news this week, but look, so I'll bring in my expertise about something I know. Bridges on the one hand. So I'm a civil engineer, for those of you who don't know, in a previous life. So I've never designed a bridge, but although I probably designed in a class a bridge, but never designed a bridge that actually was built. I designed small structures that were built. A bridge is, I mean, this looks like it's a pedestrian bridge, so the forces on it are not that high. They're pretty minimal. It didn't look like an incredibly windy place, so the horizontal forces should not be pretty bad. It's a wide expanse, so it looked like a 4-lane road, 2 lanes in each direction, and that's always tricky to take on that kind of span.
Yeah.
But there are plenty of bridges much longer than that that carry cars, that have much more than that carry cars, not pedestrians. So this is not a super complex project. This is nothing out of the usual. This is pretty standard practices. Now, the bridge, I think, had some kind of a modern look to it, and they wanted to make it kind of trim and slick and cool. But again, there are plenty of bridges like that.
Well, but the thing, I'm looking at the article here that I've got linked in the program notes from Reason, and there's this technology of erecting the bridges. I guess they prefab huge chunks of it, and then they put it together using this accelerated bridge construction technology. And they were actually intending this bridge to be somewhat of a showpiece for the efficacy and, of this technology. So there was something a little bit unusual about it in that sense.
Who was I guess the government was involved heavily in
right.
adopting technology and everything. But there's nothing unique about a prefabricated concrete. You pre-stress it so that it can carry those loads better. I mean, it's already got the metal rebars in it in advance that should be able to cope with that downward stress. Yes. So maybe it's a new technology that failed. I guess that's the story.
But it's not just that, right? So I guess the contractor had some previous sketchy stuff in his past.
Well, it has to be because they wouldn't allow. No. This is not hard stuff. This is not hard stuff.
Yeah. And then the other thing is that this particular program under which this bridge was funded, it's a federal program, U.S. Department of Transportation Investments, Generating Economic Recovery. They call it the Tiger program. And it has come under scrutiny. There was a GAO report, according to Reason, that was highly critical of how they handled these grants. And in particular, what it did is that they advanced projects that had lower technical ratings in lieu of those with higher technical ratings. And they upgraded the technical ratings of 19 projects from either acceptable or recommended to highly recommended without documenting any justification for the upgrade. And then they said, knowing this about the program under which it was funded in general, they didn't know whether in particular they had done that with this project, at least at the time of the Reason writing the article. But basically they prioritize politics over technical attributes.
So what happens when you give politicians or you give these government agencies a big pool of money? It's incredibly corrupting and it's incredibly corrupt. And corruption is almost unavoidable here. It's not their money. There are lots of pressure groups to tell them, put the money here, put the money there, local congressmen, local politicians, local groups that put in pressure. It's not driven by the local needs, and it's not driven by the ability of localities to raise money, or it's not driven by economic requirements that could self-fund these things. Mm-hmm. It's driven by politics, and so they have shortcuts. It doesn't surprise me at all. And look, this is what happens when you take a lot of money and you establish infrastructure project, right? I mean, so Tiger, this whole project comes out of Obama's stimulus package, 2009, where they awarded $8.6 billion of different grants to build infrastructure. It's interesting that was supposed to stimulate the economy back in 2009, and they're only spending the money now. But put that aside, the whole idea of the federal government. I mean, I said this when we talked about infrastructure before. So I don't think government should do any infrastructure. Government shouldn't just do infrastructure, period. This should be privatized. You can't privatize it, particularly today with technology. It would be cool to privatize it. Now, you would have some privacy concerns, Amy, because I would put GPS chips on all the cars so we could build them for when they drove on my road.
Right. But no, I wouldn't have the concern, right? And sometime maybe we can actually talk privacy at more length.
So I don't think
the private companies having the information does not bother me. It's the fact that the government can get it without a warrant from those private companies. That's what bothers me. Yeah.
So all of that. So you could build it privately, but if you're going to have the public, if you're going to have government build infrastructure, then I agree with, I guess, some conservatives and some libertarians who argue make it local, and because the corruption, the scale of incompetence, the scale of perverse incentives, the scale by which it become politicized at the federal level is unbelievable. It's massive. Also, at the federal level, they can say, "Oh, we're going to spend $1 trillion as Trump did on infrastructure," right. And it doesn't mean anything in terms of I can't see my tax dollars going into this. Whereas states have balanced budget requirements. Mm-hmm. They often have to raise bonds in order to do this. So they have to go to the voters and get permission. Now, I think voters are way too permissive about these things. Still there's corruption and there's still problems. I'm not saying there are no problems. This is by far not my ideal solution. But for the federal government to engage in hundreds of billions of dollars of infrastructure projects is just asking for bridges to nowhere. It's asking for bridges that collapse. It's asking for incompetence and bribery and fraud, and that's what you get. And you get it that the politicians, and you get it from the bureaucrats. I mean, they're all corrupt. I mean, they really are corrupt. This is corruption, not exactly the same as in Eastern Europe, where or in Latin America, where you get a suitcase of cash, although that has happened, and I'm sure that still happens. But I think the corruption here is a little bit more subtle, where the guy in charge of distributing the funds from Tiger will, after 5 years, get a job at one of the big construction companies at a really, really good salary to be in charge of their relationship with the regulators that he used to run, right? And that happens every day, all the time. I know it from bank regulators, but it happens in every dimension of regulation. But this is the kind of corruption that you get once you let government do things that it's not supposed to do. It's inevitable. You can't stop it.
Yeah. And for government to be engaging in all of these things that it shouldn't be doing, you can only, expect the efficiency of the post office, so to speak. So another article that I saw just today, I added into the notes, I guess I have it from Washington Post. It says that a lead engineer who was responsible for this bridge left a voicemail for a state transportation official warning of, quote, some cracking 2 days before the structure crashed. 2 full days. So, okay, the inefficiency of the post office, but don't you think within 2 days, this state official who should lose job and everything else could have gotten out there and been bothered to check it out?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. I think that and I don't know if it went to state official or went to the university, because
it says state transportation official. So there was a voicemail message left for a state transportation official 2 days before.
The Wall Street Journal today is saying engineers gave a briefing on crack.
Wow.
Hours before Florida bridge collapse, university says. So no safety issues were raised in a 2-hour presentation, but they did say there was a crack and there were problems with the crack. So again, the engineers screwed up here. So there's no question this is a massive engineering screw up. I don't know who the civil engineer was on this bridge, but this is not hard. This is something that should be, that you should be able to design. And again, I don't want to say all government infrastructure collapses and kills people, because I don't think that's true. Most of government infrastructure is fine because the engineers who are responsible for it and the construction companies who are responsible for it are basically good at what they do. And they are liable for what they do, whether the government is paying for it or not. So they have a strong incentive. At the end of the day, this is a freak occurrence. Let's not generalize. It's an opportunity to talk about the perversions and the distortions created by government. But it is a freak occurrence. I mean, government is funding bridges all over the country all the time, every day. And it's very, very unusual for something like this to happen. But for this is really bizarre, because again, bridges are not that hard. Now I look at the expanse, it's very wide. Mm-hmm. Nobody was on the bridge, so there were no pedestrians. It looks like it's in the middle of construction. The victims are all in the cars underneath the bridge.
Yes.
And it looks like while the bridge was constructed, the continuation was not. Mm. And so to me, again, looking at this as an engineer, it's not the forces here have nowhere to go. So when you build a bridge like this, when you have to anchor it to the ground. So I'm looking at a picture of it, and there's construction at both ends of it that is just in the process of being constructed. And usually what you would do is you will build that first and then build the bridge and attach it immediately. Mm. So when there's force coming down on it, right, that force gets distributed along the bridge to the rest of the pavement, if you will, into the ground. And that's not happening here. So all the pressure pulling down is going down, and it just buckled.
The other thing that occurred to me now, I didn't, I took some civil engineering as well, but I didn't get as far along as you did. One of the things that I remember from civil engineering was when you look at the videos of airplane wings, for example, and all of the, kind of wobbling that those do. If you watch that, it actually makes you a little nervous about flying, right? But yeah, but they're designed to be able to do all of this. And then I remember there was a collapse, a very famous bridge collapse.
I saw the same video.
Tacoma or something, Washington.
So,
yeah, and the point of it was that you could have a relatively small force, but that it could start within a structure, the frequency, right? That like a resonating frequency or
bang. I don't think that happened here.
Well, but so what I was thinking was, if you don't have the last parts of the structure built, the end parts, the length of the thing has something to do with the frequency that would be required to bring it down. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. So, it'll be interesting to see what they say at the end caused this, but I doubt, it's bizarre that it happened, and it's bizarre it's built like this. This looks like somebody made a massive mistake here. Massive.
Yeah, I was looking here at the text of the voicemail, and the engineer who reported the crack did say that he didn't think that there was an issue from a safety perspective, according to him. So while he told them of the problem, he didn't flag it as a safety issue. What would be interesting to know is whether the problem with the Tiger program in general was specifically applicable to this project. Did they upgrade this project in terms of technical virtues in a way that they shouldn't have because of politics?
Again, any engineer should have seen it coming. I just don't understand it. It really is bizarre, because again, this is civil engineering 101. This is nothing overly complex, unless this is really a brand new technology, which nobody understood, but then you don't put it over a buzzing highway. And again, where's the testing? So did they speed it up without testing the technology because some government official decided that it had to be now?
And moreover, why, if they were doing, I understand they might have been doing something with the bridge that day and people weren't on it, like you were saying, but then maybe close down traffic if they're doing anything that might cause, because there were some cables, I guess they were tightening, there was something going on as well, and maybe they needed to take more precautions.
Information about it would be interesting to follow up.
Definitely. So then the other story that inspired, again, this whole I'm from the government and I'm here to help nostalgia, is this one from Wall Street Journal. And it sounds a little innocuous at the headline. I could be an A student if I could just read my notes. And it's a complaint about the trend of professors. And I don't blame professors who do this. The professors say, you cannot use laptops in my class anymore. You need to just take your notes by hand. And the reason they do it is because the kids are just on Facebook, or they're watching our show on YouTube or something in the middle of class. And as much as I love people to watch our show on YouTube, they should not be doing it in class.
My attitude as a professor was, if you don't want to come to class, don't come to class. If I'll fail you, but and if you can't pass the exams, at the end of the day, you have to pass the exams. And if you want to watch the internet while I'm speaking, as long as you're not distracting me and the other kids, go ahead. I don't like you sleeping, because that's distracting to me.
When they're laughing at something online, it's distracting too.
That's true. I used to throw chalk at the sleepers, because once in a while they would fall asleep. I think today I'd be sued. And of course there are no chalk. So today I'd be throwing, these markers and, splitting people's heads. But yeah, one of the great advantages of chalk is you could throw it at students without injuring them.
I had my high school English teacher who assigned me the fountainhead used to do that.
There you go. It's an age-old, habit of.
At the Air Force Academy, when students were sleeping, we were told that we were not only allowed to, but supposed to tell the cadets that they had to stand.
So you want to hear my story? My story about that?
Yes, sure. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anybody cares, but funny Yaron stories. Okay, here's a funny Yaron story. So I was in tank school. And I was 18, and you don't sleep much. 4 hours, because you're doing guard duty and you're doing training, and they keep you up. You don't sleep more than 4, maybe 5 hours a night. Mm-hmm. And then you go into class, and the class was really, really, really boring. I mean, it was dumbed down. It was very, very simple stuff, and it was boring. And I would immediately, as soon as I sat down, I would fall asleep. So they had the same principle, like in the Air Force Academy. If you fall asleep, you have to stand up. So they would stand me up. Didn't help.
You fall asleep standing up.
Fall asleep standing up. So I used to stand holding the chair, and I used to sleep. So that pissed them off, and they'd really get angry. And I think all the teachers kind of got together and said, "What are we going to do about this Yaron Brook? He keeps falling asleep standing up." And by the way, scores perfect marks on all the exams. But they said, "Okay, Yaron, from now on, you have to stand up on the chair." So I used to literally, in all my classes, stand on a chair at the back of the class. And then if you fell asleep, you would fall and break your neck. So that's how they kept me awake in tank school in the Israeli army. In the days where I think you couldn't sue them for harassment. I think today they couldn't get away with stuff like that.
My cadets were not nearly as resourceful as you. So if I did have to make them stand, they stayed awake just from the basic standing. I had, I think I told
bored as me. You were probably a better professor who taught them more challenging material.
I was teaching interesting material. That's for sure. It wasn't too slow, but philosophy at 7:30 in the morning, that one semester was hard on any cadet. But the cadets, they'd have to stand in formation for a long time. And they used to talk routinely about the cadets falling asleep or not even just falling asleep, like they'd fall over not because they fell asleep. There's something weird would happen if they had to stand really still in formation for a long time, and they would just fall over. Weird stuff.
I never.
Anyway, you are quite resourceful if you can sleep standing up. You're on.
I could.
It's beautiful. So let's go back to this. So you would be very laissez-faire about this. You would go ahead and let them be on whatever.
As long as they know the material. As long as they know the material at the end of the day. I never went to. I often didn't go to class. Certainly in undergraduate, but even in graduate school, I read the book or I went to tutorials or whatever. But I often skipped classes, and I couldn't expect my students to do what I didn't do.
I did have one semester where I was in an economics class that conflicted directly with crew practice because I was on crew for a year. Yeah. And so I hardly ever went to this class, only when I could get out of the practice. And I still got an A in economics. It was pretty funny. But anyway,
let's go on to content. I don't know if anybody appreciates our practice.
No, they don't love our stories. So
I don't know.
So let's get into this. So
see any hearts and thumbs up and stuff following there for my funny story. So
they didn't like your story. Oh, so all these students are complaining because they have to handwrite their notes and they can't read their notes. And they think it's the most horrible thing in the world. And it turns out that one of the culprits is that today in government schools, they are not teaching the kids to write very much. So you'll learn handwriting maybe in kindergarten, first grade, and then they teach them just how to use keyboards. And so all of these students are going here ill-equipped for this. So, I mean, there's a couple things. First of all, I have a little spiel that I give all students anyway. I actually think it is best to handwrite notes myself. And the reason I do, I mean, you could just say, okay, Amy, you're old, and that's why you're just very old fashioned. But handwriting, due to the fact that you can't do it very quickly, forces you to essentialize in a way that sitting there on a computer laptop taking notes would not. You can almost take dictation in a class depending on the professor, and that's not a good way to take notes. It's just going to make you do the process of essentialization later if you bother to do it. Whereas if you can only write, so I actually think that's better. But here we have
type with one finger still. So
you type with one finger.
My speed is probably about the same as writing, so I can't take dictation. I still type. I'm old, so I never learned how to type. So I type with one hand. And
your birthday's coming up, I think, relatively soon. So we'll have to give you the computer program Mavis Bacon Teaches Typing. No. And then you can learn to type like the rest. My grandmother really strongly encouraged me to take a real typing class in high school.
You're smart.
It was really smart. So I went ahead and did it.
I agree with you I think that's right. I think now I don't know that I would force students to do it, but I do think that it's true that I find myself when I'm doing an outline for a talk or I'm doing the first level thinking, it's much easier for me just to write stuff out. Or when I'm at a talk, I far prefer just to write stuff up. Yeah, like that.
My notes for the beginning today.
and I have the problem of not being able to read my handwriting. But I write very, very succinct. I don't write very fast. I don't type very fast, but I write very succinct. But also what I found was that I don't like PowerPoint. I hate PowerPoint. What I really like is writing on the chalkboard or on the whiteboard, because I think the pace is different. So when you write on a chalkboard, like an equation, like you're teaching finance or engineering, like I used to do, you're writing slowly. And therefore the students are absorbing and you're explaining while you're writing. Whereas you put it up on a PowerPoint and it's there. And it's all grasped as one unit. Whereas, so there's a crow issue here, right? When you're doing it slowly, you know, what is it? No, E equals M times C squared. Now they've taken in an M, they've taken in the equal sign, they've taken each unit in separately, and now they can see the equation. Whereas if you just put it up on a PowerPoint, I think it's too much to absorb. It's harder than to break it down, and the pacing is just not there. So I've never liked PowerPoints, and I tried when I used to teach always to use a whiteboard or a blackboard and to actually write it all out, and particularly to do the equations and stuff, and do it in the pace that I think they can slowly integrate it, see the connections, make the integration, see the logic, and then they can try it themselves.
So you've leveled up from what I was saying, because regardless of the method that the professor uses to present something, I think in terms of students taking notes, it is best to handwrite with essentializing. But I guess there would be no way to do that effectively if the professor is dumping PowerPoints at them as well.
I mean, you know, what a lot of these PowerPoints that people do, and there's like a page of a book written on the PowerPoint, basically.
I've been guilty of trying that in the past, because PowerPoint, if you're going to do it in a way that sort of mimics what you're talking about, the writing on the board, you can paste a PowerPoint and you can use some of the technical features of the software to mimic that, but you have to be very skilled at it.
And very hard because again, when you're writing, you're limited by physics. When you're doing that, you have to consciously control it, consciously think about the pace you want to present the material. So the best way to do PowerPoint, in my view, is to show pictures and to show very few words and maybe like an outline, a few outlines, but never have a complete sentence on a PowerPoint. Never have a paragraph on a PowerPoint. Never have more than 10 words on any slide. In my view, that's the way. But I still think students could probably do it on a computer, but you'd have to train them to do it. That is, I could still see them taking notes in essentials, but you'd have to train them. Again, the nice thing about handwriting is it forces you to do it because you just can't keep up.
Well, there may also be something about, doing the physical writing that imprints things into the brain in a different way. And that's a whole thing as well. But so my point here, bringing this into the theme overall, is that apparently our government schools are not teaching kids handwriting skills such that they are able to write legibly the way that I used to. Revealing my age, I took the bar exam, the California bar exam, and I hand wrote my essays when I took that.
All my exams I hand wrote when I took exams. So yeah.
But yeah, I mean, today, nobody would take the California bar exam handwriting. I mean, you would fail. A significant percentage of us, when I took it back in '98, we would handwrite. And then therefore, of course, I was competing with other people who also handwrote. But I handwrote all of my exams all through law school, even though it was at the stage where people were starting to bring in their laptops and do it then. That's just what we did.
Something about, as you write, brain connections are being made. There's something about the coordination between hand and brain, hand and eye, all of that, that I just don't know if you get that from typing. But what I think is happening is the teachers are lazy. They want something simple and quick. It's easier to teach the kids to type once. And if I'm a professor, I'd much rather read typewritten essays than handwritten essays. Everything about being a teacher that wants to minimize the workload suggest go for typing. Don't have the kids handwrite anything. So I can understand why they do it, but yeah, it really is bad. It really
Yeah. And yet, so here we are, most states, probably all the states in our country right now, guarantee to the kids what they call a free and appropriate education. And because of that, you've got this whole system that's geared towards minimizing costs and
Absolutely.
teachers who want to make their workload a lot easier. And therefore they failed to teach a critical skill that will, serve the students throughout their academic careers and life in general.
If private schools have to do it differently. I just don't know. It would be interesting to find out.
Yeah, I would definitely want to,
this could be part of the whole progressive education movement, could be part of the whole, what is being taught at teacher colleges. It could be much broader than just a government issue. It could be more about the philosophy of education today and the state of teacher colleges that encourage this. It might be a whole theory about how you want them to learn how to type, because then they become computer savvy. They create these whole theories in order to justify their nonsense.
Well, yeah, because you want to have a tech career later. But, keyboarding skills are pretty easy. I learned them in one semester in high school. We're going to get it for you. We're going to give you the software Mavis Bacon, and you'll be up on the keyboarding.
And I can understand some people who are, some of our younger listeners who probably haven't used their handwriting skills almost, since they went to school, and that all they do is type, and that they have become accustomed to it, and they can do all the things that we can do writing by typing. So I don't want to knock it. I don't know enough about, and I don't know that enough study has gone into whether if you train somebody properly in the art of taking notes, the art of essentialization, you can't mimic the same thing in computers. I don't want to be, but there's no question that there's something about writing that links to the brain in a way that it doesn't seem obvious that you can do in typing, but maybe there's ways to recreate that by doing the typing in some particular way. I don't know.
If it was taught properly, perhaps. And like you were saying, just as you can learn to deliver a PowerPoint presentation in a way that's still able to be taken in by the audience, you can also learn probably to take notes on a laptop in a way that is essentializing as well. But it would be great if more students would learn it. And my guess is that the truth is probably somewhere, that everything varies by the individual, so that some people will learn a lot better if they're taking their notes by hand, and maybe others will do just fine, and it makes sense doing the keyboard. But here's another education related story. And again, the government's going to help you by providing this quote free education, and what are the consequences. We're still looking at a series of follow-up stories on the horrible Parkland shooting. And one of the things that they're talking about is, whether or not there should be more of a feed of the kids into, sort of the juvenile prosecution, kind of the juvenile authorities, the police authorities from the schools. And there's this trend apparently in a lot of the schools that instead of the schools treating these discipline problems on their own or taking care of these discipline problems on their own, that they'll immediately call the police in. And this has been a complaint by a lot of liberals. The story that I've got, it's just from New York Times. Will Betsy DeVos expand the school to prison pipeline? They're saying that the school should be handling these discipline problems, and yet they're just throwing up their hands too quickly and calling the police, and when really they should take care of it. But
it sounds like the Obama administration actually encourage schools to stop calling the police and to take care of it more themselves, and to do less disciplining, all in the name of the disciplining is biased, it's racist, it's motivated by racism. The police get called in more when it's a black kid causing problems than when a white kid is causing problems. So the Obama administration went the other way and kind of said, no, the school needs to do this. And, as a consequence, I think now there's the Betsy DeVos Education Department is going the other way and saying, no, we want to go back to the old system where the schools encourage the police to get involved much sooner. And the truth is, who the hell knows?
No, I mean, the problem is that we have the government school system as such.
Exactly.
And
why is there Treasury of Education, Treasury of Education? Why is there Secretary of Education? Why is there some centralized bureaucrat deciding how all schools can function? Why is there one policy for all schools? Why can't private schools, in an ideal world, private schools make their own policies? Some of them would work at the police, some of them would not. We would see what works and what doesn't work. If there's racism in some schools, and parents would take their kids out of those schools and put them in the schools where there wasn't racism. The problem with what we have today is that it's all politicized, that it's all motivated by politics. And I can't trust the studies anymore. Is there systemic racism in our school, or isn't there systemic racism in our school? Depends on who does the study. And I haven't looked at the stats, and I haven't looked at the details, so I can't tell. I wouldn't be surprised if some areas in the country there was systemic racism. I wouldn't be shocked if there wasn't. So, but I don't know, and I don't think anybody knows. But it's a problem when we treat everything the same, when we have a one-size-fit-all kind of policy to solve this problem.
Yeah, and the big problem, as I see it here, I mean, you and Brad Thompson talked about progressive education as being a huge factor in bringing about incidents like the, horrible atrocities like this Parkland shooting. But another factor is the legal environment. So the schools are being told that they have the mandate to provide a free and appropriate education for every single student, every eligible student. And if they have somebody who's very troubled, like this scumbag from Parkland, then what they have to do with him is they have to not only provide that education, but they have to provide it using what they call the least restrictive means possible. And what that entails is that they have to mainstream these kids. So they are mandated by law, state law, because the states want to get all the goodies from the federal government, right? They're mandated to put this kid in a regular classroom like everybody else, regardless of him having serious behavioral issues. And it's not surprising that that kid is going to act out and get in trouble and do stuff. And then they are put in this conflict because of that mandate. And
their only alternative is to call the police. But then they've escalated it, and they're worried because, they don't want to send into the police system, into the legal system, the juvenile system, kids who don't belong there. On the other hand, if they keep them, they're troublemakers, and they're stuck. And more kind of, some schools are going to err on one side, other schools are going to err on the other side. The whole thing is a distortion and a perversion. And again, it takes away the ability of schools to make decisions for themselves and to compete with one another based on the criteria that they're going to use for these kind of students.
Yeah. And it's,
you could have a school that had zero tolerance. You're out, you're kicking out, or we call the police and you declare it in advance and you let everybody know. And then parents can decide if to send the kids there or not. Yeah. And they can have another school that says, oh no, we'll work with the kids and we'll coddle them and we'll put them in special classes and whatever. And, and let those two schools compete and let's see what makes sense. And it would probably make sense is for some parents and some kids, one school makes sense. And for some kids and some parents, another school makes sense. And that's the beauty of the market. The marketplace gives you that kind of diversity. And we don't have it today. We have regimented schooling, Bismarck-like, Prussian-like, German-like, with a tinge of progressive mayhem. So you have, on the one hand, regimented. On the other hand, they don't learn anything. I think Ryan, who's on YouTube, says, he's a junior in high school. He earns straight A's. He takes all the most rigorous classes, and he doesn't learn anything. And I believe him. He's not getting an education. He's not learning anything. This is the state of American education for the most part is abysmal. And unfortunately, not unfortunately, but the fact is that the poorer the school, the worse education. And then because the worse education, the more troubled the kids are, the more they act up, the more the police get involved.
They're bored.
Kids end up becoming criminals or whatever. And then the more that reinforces the poverty and that reinforces the problems all the problems that are created as a consequence of what happened. So, again, we have an entire system from welfare to public schools to the way the justice system works to the way these kids are treated that institutionalizes people into poverty, that creates these cycles where it's almost impossible for these kids to break out of poverty. And it's tragic. And that's not capitalism doing that. That is statism. That is the government. That is government schools and government welfare and government minimum wage.
Government helping you.
Yeah, it's government trying to help the poor. It's the war on poverty. The war on poverty is actually a war on the poor. It's a war to establish, to institutionalize people into poverty, to keep them poor and to not let them rise up. And then, of course, we get.
Now, you think that's the intention, though, because I think for a lot of these people, the intention is to actually help. And then what we do is we see the consequences when government takes it upon itself to help people.
So I think there are two things going on. One is so a big chunk of people, I think a majority of them, just don't care. Whoa.
That was interesting.
So we might have just lost Blog Talk Radio. If somebody's on the chat of Blog Talk Radio, let us know, but we might have lost Blog Talk Radio. All right. If we did, then we'll use the audio from YouTube or from
the Zoom recording. Yeah.
Zoom recording. Let me see if we can re-engage.
I've had Blog Talk kick me off. It's kind of a pain.
Yeah, I don't know.
And a lot of times I'm not able to get back on.
Yeah, it doesn't look like we can get back in. Although it looks like I'm still on. I don't know. I'm not sure what that is. All right, we'll keep going, and then we can go back and test. What were we saying?
So I was saying, isn't it that they're actually trying to help? It's not that they're trying to institutionalize poverty or
people. I think the majority just doesn't care about poor people. I'd say all those lefties in the Upper East Side of New York don't give one iota for poor people. Now, they think they do because they feel guilty for their success and they feel guilty because they don't help poor people enough. So there's a certain sense in which they delude themselves into thinking that they care. They pretend that they care. They want to care. They believe morally they have to care, but they don't care. Right. So the way to do that, if you don't really care about it, but you think you should care, is to let somebody else deal with it. So they write checks to charity and they let the government do it, and they vote Democratic, and they want the war on poverty, but they don't want to hear about the results. They don't want to know that it fails. And when you tell them that fails, they kind of roll their eyes because they don't want to hear it, because they don't care about these kids. They just want these kids out of their sight. They don't want to see them. They don't want to think about them. They don't want to know them, yet they don't want to feel the guilt, right? So they want to feel like they've done something they've been a Mother Teresa a little bit. They've done their little thing. And this is how altruism works on people. It's not that people go out there and self-sacrifice and really cut themselves and sweat and go into the slums and do what Mother Teresa did. No, they want their altruism and their nice apartment, their nice life, and their nice, mink coat all at the same time, right? So instead of the altruism manifesting itself in that kind of action, it manifests itself in guilt, political activism, and charity. So the minimal required effort to do anything. So I think most people really just don't care. They say they care, they don't care. Then there's another set that doesn't know. They're innocent, they're stupid, they don't think, they're not very sophisticated. It's really is unintended consequences. And when the unintended consequences come about, they evade them because they can't think that their intentions are bad. So they try something else. And it's the people there's some people who innocently Hard to believe innocently, but innocently, oh no, just next time it'll work. Next time socialism will work. Next time we'll do this. Next time we'll do that. Just something. And then the third group is the Robert Reichs, the Paul Krugmans, the Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, the intellectuals, the people who just evade everything in life. They're evasive. They're Ellsworth Chewy-like. They want to destroy. They hate. They despise goodness. They despise success. They couldn't give one iota about the young kid in the inner cities. They use it as a political football. They know they don't give a damn. If you put them in the right situation, they would be the Caligulas. They would do awful things, and they because they're so-called civilized, they don't do it. But they're just awful, horrible, evil, disgusting human beings. And you know, so they use any tool to lie in order to achieve their goal. And their goal is power over man's soul. They go over man's mind, over man's material well-being. If the leftist, you know, take somebody like Paul Krugman, who knows economics, who knows half of what he says doesn't make any sense, but it doesn't matter. It gives him power. People listen. He is the most read person in the country. Wow, he is the real Ellsworth Chewy. Or take Robert Reich, who just did this awful video on Ayn Rand, who's clearly lying through his teeth. Now, I don't know if he knows enough about Ayn Rand to know how much he's lying, but he lies on everything else. I mean, I've seen, he's smart. He's not an idiot. He knows economics. He knows this stuff, but he is motivated by hatred, by pouring down. So 3 types: those who really don't care, the innocent, and the haters. And I think the innocents and the haters are the small groups, and the people who really just don't care and don't want to be bothered with the evidence are the majority. And they're the voters, and they're the you know, all these liberals who give, you know, at cocktail parties, sipping their champagne, give all these things about how awful the rich are and how we need to do more to help the poor. And here they are in their, you know, fancy schmancy, you know, homes. And, you know,
my favorite is Al Gore, you know, and his carbon footprint.
Yeah, but you know, but Al Gore is the latter group. Al Gore is a nihilist. Al Gore knows better. Al Gore is corrupt. Al Gore is just is a nasty. Yeah, I don't think he cares, but he knows he doesn't care, right? He knows it. He's just out there for power's sake. You know, all these people, you know, so you've got these 3 groups. The latter group is mostly intellectuals and some politicians. The middle group is kind of community activists and people out there who really supposedly want to do good. And the other group are the people who fund and vote for all this stuff. You know, generally successful people, you know, they get money. They're rich because they were successful. They're very good in their profession. They're admirable when it comes to their.
And is it then because they are, you know, they've kind of bought into this dichotomy that anything having to do with ethics and stuff is not really practical for their lives. And so they're just going to live their practical lives and do their church on Sunday and affect ethics. And, oh, okay, I've taken care of that department. I don't have to think about it anymore.
They also feel guilty. And they take their altruism, you know, seriously in that sense, in the sense that they feel guilty. And it's, you know, it's like Bill Gates. Like, you don't get a sense from Bill Gates that he's sacrificing, right? That he's going out there and pouring money into things he doesn't believe in, that he's really suffering or anything. I really think Bill Gates is a mixture of the first 2. I don't think that he feels guilty. He doesn't come across as a guy who thinks he feels guilty. I think he thinks he needs to feel guilty. Right? I don't even think he necessarily feels
guilty for not feeling guilty.
I think he thinks he feels guilty for not feeling guilty. That's good. Yeah, I think that's right. And he does all this stuff out of a sense that this is what he's supposed to do. And he because he's a serious guy. I'm a huge admirer of Gates in spite of everything he does and says, because he takes what he does seriously. So he thinks he should be helping the poor. So he takes it seriously. He goes out there and really tries to help the poor. And he tries to learn from it. And he tests, and things that don't work, he drops, and things that, you know, but he never questions the basic premises. He's never questioned the fundamental question of altruism, but he also doesn't take it too seriously because he's too much of a productive guy to do that. So it really is, altruism is so evil and so insidious and so sneaky in the way it impacts people's cognition, people's lives, and people's behavior.
Yeah. And so, one of the points to make overall today is, if the government is going to try to help by instituting altruism, by forcing altruism on all of us, this is the necessary consequence, all of this carnage and horrible outcomes that we're seeing here. There's just no other option because of the underlying ideology that they're trying to implement for whatever motivation they have, each of those three groups, to implement it in the way that they do. Another realm of this, not government schools are horrible. They need to be abolished. I'm all 100% behind what you and Brad Thompson were talking about in terms of abolish government schools as quickly as possible. It's
and the teacher colleges. The teacher colleges need to go.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, but again, it's for me in terms of if you're thinking about safety and that Parkland shooting, I would almost think that this mandate that they provide the free and appropriate education, that they mainstream these troubled kids, is just as much, I think, to blame as the progressive education. The progressive education is destroying the minds, and then they're not allowing the teachers to do anything
they're not letting
deal with the discipline problems.
Them out of school and I mean, it's very difficult to discipline kids today, and kids are coddled by the school system, by their parents, by the entire society. And this is part of the results. These are all together. Yep. And
then here's another realm. Trump is going to help all of these people who are addicted to opioids. He's been making that his kind of personal cause ever since the journalist from Fox, I'm forgetting his name right now, but his kid, I think, died of some opioid related cause. Trump is making journalists his favorite people in the world to do special favors for. So this is a big thing that he's doing now.
He's doubling down on the war on drugs. I mean, he's really doubling down on failed policy.
Right. And I looked in
immoral policy.
I looked into this whole issue around the time that Prince died of the opioid overdose. And opioids, I had a personal experience. They make it very hard for you to breathe if you're overdosed with opioids. It's very scary. These are very potent drugs. We should have them. We should have access to them. But I don't think government is the place to handle opioid addiction. And so here's the latest. Trump is putting together an opioid plan that includes the death penalty for dealers. That's the thing that's going to stop the opioid addiction problem, is if you institute the death penalty for dealers. And of course, opioids include heroin, right? But the government, every time it's gotten involved in this, from what I understand, it has done more harm than good. One is the problem of putting people who are addicted to opioids in prison, no treatment at all. And then as soon as they, when they get out.
Addicts in prison.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The addicts are in prison. And apparently when an opioid addict is released from prison, the first few days after they're out, they have a massive risk of overdose and death within those first few days, because the problem hasn't been cured. All you've done is you've applied government force to the situation, and it's this blunt instrument. It can't do anything. In terms of pushing people towards heroin and away from, pills, different opioid formulations and pills, the FDA thought that it was clever and mandated that the formulations of the prescription drugs be such that it, you couldn't, for instance, like grind it up and smoke it or do whatever it is. I don't know what it is that they all do, but you try to get it into your system in a way that creates a bigger high for you, because you've increased your tolerance over time. And so the FDA thought it was very clever and mandated that the manufacturers of these drugs change the formulations in certain ways where you can't do this. And so then what do these people do who want this high? They go straight to heroin. And they would persist in using heroin, even with apparently the fact there's heroin out there. It's not, of course, legal. And so there's this black market and shoddy quality, and, it's all hidden in the shadows. Some of this heroin, it's laced with meat tenderizer. So they're injecting this stuff into themselves with meat tenderizer, and they're getting these huge divots and welts in their skin. They can actually see what they're injecting into themselves eat away their flesh, and they still do it because they're so addicted. And apparently more were pushed into this because of what the FDA did. So, I'm from the government. I'm here to
epidemic. I mean, it's a complex phenomenon in terms of all the incentive structures, but you find government everywhere, from telling emergency doctors what they can and cannot prescribe, and making pain for Medicaid in particular high on the list of things that they had to address, and therefore they have to give the opioids, to the fact that the FDA makes it very difficult to design new drugs that might fight pain, that are not addictive, to the whole war on drugs that makes many of these drugs black market and low quality, and all this stuff. So it's socialized medicine, right? Medicare and Medicaid, Obamacare, and the kind of rigorousness with which the government tells doctors what they can and cannot prescribe and how they should behave, all the way to the war on drugs. This is a phenomena created by government. It's the entire thing would not exist. And indeed, it's also unique to the way our particular government is doing socialized medicine, because you don't find opioid epidemics in other countries. You're not finding it in socialized medicine elsewhere, partially because pain is not listed as part of the requirements. Now, they have other problems.
Well, and there's also the next step, right? So isn't it true that Sessions, one of his things now is that we should all just take aspirin or something, and we shouldn't get the pain medication?
Yeah, I think conservatives have always believed they just suck it up, right? Be a man. And you don't need this. You don't need pain medication. God didn't. If God wanted you not to feel pain, then he wouldn't have given you the toothache. Or if God didn't want you to feel pain, you wouldn't have been run over. So feel the pain, right? Feel the pain. So yes, there's certainly that kind of barbaric conservative view. And it's one of the reasons, for example, it's very difficult to get pain medication past the FDA, is there's this conservative idea that pain is not life-threatening. Pain is not that big of an issue. And therefore, we're not going to prioritize pain. So cancer, for example, cancer drugs, relatively speaking, very easy to get FDA approval for experimental cancer drug.
Okay.
Very easy to get something for heart disease. But anything that has to do either with a rare disease, with pain, with life extension, I guess the only exception of that was Viagra. Viagra is the only drug I know of which is a lifestyle drug, and its equivalents, which the FDA passed relatively easily. And it's probably because it's all old men on the board of the FDA. I don't know. It's mostly old men on the board of the FDA. I don't know why that was an exception, but it really is
political pressure from the old male politicians.
Maybe, but
right.
It's very rare that lifestyle drugs or life improvement drugs or pain medication actually get fast-tracked at the FDA, whereas life-threatening drugs, particularly for the big diseases that have huge pressure groups, like cancer and heart disease, that have whole, patient groups and people who wear ribbons and days of the year named after them and all that stuff. So there's massive amounts of money put into breast cancer research, right? Way disproportionate to its actual risk relative to other cancers. But because it has a group that advocates for it constantly, everybody goes after that, and the FDA is going to allow much more experimentation there than in other things. So FDA is very, 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 very political. One of the ideas that we were bouncing around was, how do you use blockchain to get rid of the FDA and create private equivalents of the FDA? And Abatin came up with some really innovative ideas on how you could use blockchain to do exactly that, and to create a mechanism to verify drugs and safety of drugs, with a mechanism that allowed to do that without an FDA. So really cool stuff. You still need doctors and experts and all. You need trials and all that stuff, but the verification of all that would happen much easier, much smoother, much more efficiently, much more transparently than what happened.
What came to my mind, though, is that you would definitely have to have a comprehensive survey, for instance, of users to make sure that a drug was safe. Because if you just left it to the individuals who to decide whether or not to report their results into the big database of blockchain or whatever, I'm envisioning this, you'll have only those people who have really suffered, say, come up and self-report.
Yeah, but you could have the doctors report it, not the patients, and you can make it a condition for the doctor to report for them to even get the drug so they can distribute to their patients. So you could create all kinds of mechanisms to get the information, but also you could have the drug companies, in a sense, put up all their studies up, on the blockchain or whatever in the database, right? And then you would have all these experts who would verify the studies and vote, in a sense, on the studies.
It's sounding like Wikipedia almost.
Yeah, it would. One of the benefits, one of the things is the use of crowdsourcing, but you would have experts. You would have only certain people who would crowdsource. You would use crowdsourcing to verify the authenticity and effectiveness of particular things that were put into the database. That's part of what blockchain, I think, allows you to do. And then, of course, you would get all this other information from actual users, or maybe from doctors, or maybe from the pharmacies, or whatever. So, who knows what the market would come up with. But yeah, we need to get rid of the FDA. But the idea, think of this, that you're going to sentence to death people who are committing a victimless crime, a nonviolent crime.
Exactly.
A crime that does not violate individual rights, a crime that involves a voluntary transaction. You're going to put them on death row. This is why I'd rather be anti-death penalty, period, and take this option out from politicians than even have anybody contemplating this idea. This is disgusting, a disaster. This is exactly what you'd expect from Donald Trump and Jeff Sessions. Sessions is a disaster, horrible, disgusting, conservative theocrat. And this is the kind of thing that kill the people we disagree with on morality. Let's just kill the people who don't do things we like. Let's just slaughter them, right? Talk about it.
And again, it's not going to take care of the problem. The underlying problem is the addiction. And again, as I understand it, the reason that people have been pushed towards these dealers in the first place is because of the FDA requiring that they reformulate these drugs. So there's definitely got to be a better way. And it looks from this Politico story that Trump, the White House, they've been circulating this plan only among political appointees, and that there's a number of congressional Republicans and other people who think that this plan is no good. So we can hope that checks and balances actually work in this case, but I've seen checks and balances fail.
Yeah, no, I think it'll work. I can't imagine these people. There's a significant number of congressmen and senators who want to decriminalize more and more of the drugs. So I find this hard to believe that it would pass, but you never know. But the fact that anybody is proposing this is so. Anyway, what can you say when you have somebody like Trump?
Yeah, let's listen to this. Under the most recent version of the plan, this is on a different topic, not the death penalty for the dealers. It says, the recent version of the plan, which has gone through several revisions, the Trump administration proposes to change how the government pays for opioid prescriptions to limit access to powerful painkillers. Imagine you're in massive pain and the government's telling you, oh no, sorry, you have to suffer, and that's it. And so they're going to actually implement Sessions' comment.
When they can and cannot use it, when it's appropriate. Some people are more susceptible to addiction. Some people are less susceptible. Sometimes it's an emergency. If you don't give the person a pain medication, they're going to literally die or really, really, really suffer. And sometimes it's just mild pain that they could probably take an aspirin and deal with, but they're giving opioids. So instead of, again, leaving it up to hospitals and doctors and patients and private decision-making about what kind of medication to use, with one size fit all, government regulation, government standards, government prescriptions on what can or cannot be done. But if the idea, even floating the idea of a death penalty to drug distributors, is so authoritarian and so disgusting. It's really shocking to me. It really is.
No, and
that anybody would take this seriously, and it looks like some congressmen are taking it seriously.
There needs to be, I would say, a great book that would be along the lines of the books that you and Don Watkins have written, and also John Allison, showing that the financial crisis in our country was the result of government. Similarly, this opioid crisis, which is apparently getting worse, they're saying that there was a 30% spike in opioid overdoses last summer. So the crisis is worsening, showing how this is a result of the different government actions so far. That would be a powerful book.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it. I think there's more going on here. I think there is increased depression in America. I think there is a growing lower middle class or working class of people who are sick of their life, and you see that with the rising suicides. You see it with the decline in life expectancy for men, and this is a phenomena that's unique to men, ages 45, I think, to 55. You're seeing that age group have lower life expectancy. I think did you raise that one article by The Economist who found that this phenomenon was happening? No, it's not on your list. Anyway, there are real issues about people searching and not finding purpose in their lives, people losing self-esteem, people giving up on life, people giving up on jobs, people being told that they're helpless, that they're useless. And I think the mixed economy and the awful state of our philosophy is really driving people to be depressed and to be suicidal and to not care and to go on these things in order to escape. So I think part of the opioid epidemic is a form of suicide, is people escaping reality, not because of pain, but because they haven't been taught how to cope with reality. They can't use their minds. They're emotional beings, and reality is moving forward. They can't deal with the technology. They can't deal with having to move from one location to another because the jobs have moved to Arkansas from Ohio. They can't cope with a changing, growing world, and therefore they've given up, and part of giving up is taking opioids. So I think partially it's government policies that drives people towards taking opioids through the medical system, and part of it is kind of the same thing that drove people to vote for Donald Trump. They're depressed, they're angry, they're alienated. I mean, Nathaniel Branden has a wonderful essay in Capitalism Not Known Ideal, I think, about alienation. I think it fits to the T what is going on today. They're alienated, they've been lied to, they're frustrated, they hate the world, they hate the intellectuals, they don't understand the world. Jobs are going to China, robots are taking over. Nobody seems to care. People seem to care more about transgender, whatever, 28 different types of gender than they do about China taking over the world. And then, and then one way to do it is to vote for a demagogue who comes to say, I can help you. I can solve your problems. I know you're right. China is the enemy. Mexico is the enemy. Immigrants are the enemy. We're going to take care of that, and you're going to be happy as a consequence. And by the way, when he doesn't take care of that, you'd expect a rise in opioid addiction as well, right? So the fact that over the last year, they got their hopes up and their hopes are being dashed, it might explain
But, pot is legal now too. So that's another option, by the way.
Pot is legal, not in the same place as my guess is that the opioid epidemic is rampant. So pot is legal in Colorado and California.
California now, yeah.
But note that the opioid epidemic is big in the center of the United States, and in places like New Hampshire. It's places that are typically have been historically working class. They're typically industrial. It's exactly Donald Trump's base. So you could correlate, I think, you can correlate Donald Trump's base with those using opioid. It's part of the reason why he's taking this so seriously. And I think the reasons are similar. I think they're looking for an escape, and Donald Trump is an escape from reality and from facts and from status quo, and going on opioids is an escape, a different type of escape, but also an escape. So I very much think that I know that a lot of people disagree with me on this, but there's a huge psychological element. There's a huge element of alienation and disappointment in life and lack of purpose and lack of self-esteem, which is driving a big chunk of the opioid epidemic.
one thing that people can do if they're going.
Somebody's asking if we can correlate heroin epidemic with rich people. No, heroin is not a drug for rich people. Heroin tends to be a poor man's drug. Rich people snort cocaine. Rich people do LSD maybe. But I don't think that heroin has been the drug of the upper middle class and the wealthy. I think heroin is primarily, and it's cheap, and partially it's cheap because it's mixed in with all kind of garbage to make it cheap. Yeah. It's primarily the drug of the lower middle class.
I mean, what did Limbaugh do? You know, he got addicted to the Oxycontin or whatever, but he didn't end up injecting heroin, as far as I remember.
Heroin, and he stopped at some point, and he got therapy. And so I just don't think I don't think this is a problem. I mean, look. If I was in hospital, and I was in hospital, and they offered me opioids, I mean, if I'm in real pain, I'm going to take them. And I took it. I think I took opium for my surgery 6 or 7 years ago. I took it for like a couple of days because I was in real pain. Yeah. But as soon as I could get off of it, I got off of it, because I know, right? And if I stayed on it and got addicted, then I would have been conscious of that addiction, and I would have done everything in my power to get off of addiction. Yeah. There has to be something that motivates people not to do that. Now, partially you could say they don't have the willpower, whatever, but there has to be something more than that. And I think it's partially that it gives them an escape. So even if it is all medical, that they're being prescribed this and they get addicted, why aren't they stopping? Why aren't they asking their doctor to put them now there's not enough clinics and not, granted, but are they really actively trying to get off? Are they going to clinics? Are they trying to use the drugs that get you off of heroin? Or
whatever? And that's the other thing. One of the things the government sometimes will do to drug addicts of various kinds is mandate some program that they have to go through. But studies have shown that if the program is actually mandated to you, it's not going to be helpful, that you have to be the willing participant as well.
Why aren't they willing? It goes back to my psychological issues. It goes back to my alienation. But also one of the things that drug legalization would do, and I once heard a great lecture by Gary Becker about this. It was really fascinating, is that they would create a whole industry to get people off of drugs, right? So you could go on heroin for 2 weeks, and then there'd be a whole industry that would cater to you to treat you to get you off the drug. So we could all experiment with heroin. Not that I would do that, but you could. And there would be, just like you could smoke today, and then there are patches and there's gum and there's pills you can take to get you off smoking. They'd be the same because they'd be a profit motive to do it, and it would be all above board. Whereas today, because the government funds it all, because it's all illegal, because it's all under the board.
Well, yeah, because it's illegal, there's this shame associated with it as well, like there isn't with these other things.
There's less research and less investment going into getting people off of drugs, which is sad.
Which is sad. We only have a few minutes. There's a couple other stories that I had along these lines of the government helping us and not really. You already talked about one of them, which is Trump halting the Broadcom takeover of Qualcomm, that there's no help that the government is giving us by stopping this deal from happening. In fact, they're probably depriving us of cheaper, awesome stuff because they're.
There's no parallel universe, but the reasoning they gave was so infantile and so didn't make any sense, and typical of what, just there's a reasoning of a central planner. I know best how 5G networks will be developed in the United States. We have to develop it in the United States because we can't let the Chinese develop them without us developing them. And I know how best. I know which company will do it. I know what Broadcom would do if they took over Qualcomm. It is so Obama-like. It is so leftist.
They actually said that he was more interventionist than Obama in the way that he did this, because at least Obama would have waited for the board of whatever to say something about it.
This is the first time it's ever been done in American history the way it was done. This was the government stepped in before the takeover even happened. All they did was bid. And that's never happened, and it's doubtful it's legal even. Usually what has to happen is that a takeover is announced, and then the government said, stop, we're going to review it, and then approve or disapprove this. The takeover wasn't even going to happen because Qualcomm was fighting it, or might not have happened. And maybe there would have been competition, or maybe somebody else would have come in and bought them, and who knows what would have happened. We don't know. We'll never know. So no, this is central planning on steroids. again, the government knowing how a new technology will be developed and knowing what the best path to the development of that new strategy is, a development that's going to happen in the private sector, but they know which companies and how and when and so on. Other than the Defense Department, which does this all the time with horrible results, I don't think this occurs anywhere else in government. And now here we have it. Trump is, Trump on many issues is a super Democrat, and the Democrats should love him. Other issues, he's not. He's not particularly. He's a conservative on other issues. Social issues, he's the exact opposite of what people always thought we would want. He's socially conservative and physically liberal. Think about
the worst of all worlds. Yeah.
Worst of all worlds. Think about
authoritarian.
Think about the explosion in debt, the explosion in government spending. Think about the increased scrutiny of takeovers and the Justice Department getting more involved in American business. Think about tariffs. Think about
about infrastructure and more bridge collapses.
More infrastructure, more government stimulus to build infrastructure. All of this is straight out of Bernie Sanders' book, right? It's not out of the Republican supposedly guidebook. And this is what this administration. Now, yes, they're deregulating, but I will say, and I think history will bear me out, that the deregulation is minor, that the deregulation is happening in some departments, but not in others. It's happening somewhat in education. It's happening at the EPA. It's not happening at Treasury, quite the opposite. I think Treasury is more quick on the regulatory trigger than it was even under Obama. I think Treasury supports much of Dodd-Frank. Treasury supports increasing the power of many of these regulatory agencies set up by Dodd-Frank. So there'll be some deregulation at the Consumer and Finance Protection, whatever, Bureau, CFPB. Yeah. So there'll be some deregulation, but it's much smaller than what he claims and what his supporters claim. And in other areas, there's actually increased regulation. And here's an example. We're going to double down on the failed big capital F.
Yeah, and they're going to have a whole new Justice Department thing that's going to prosecute people with drug related, it's garbage. So I actually had designed this show to try to avoid Trump as much as possible. We somewhat succeeded in it. Why don't we kind of end on a more positive note? Just a little bit of good news, which is, do you remember the clock boy, the kid who had the little bomb simulated looking thing in school? He finally, years later, lost the racism lawsuit against the city, the school, the police. Of course, the fact that this lawsuit went on for so long is a testament to the fact that
kid who came to school, a Muslim kid who came to school with a clock. Now, why did they think it was a bomb? Did he say something about a bomb?
It looked apparently quite a bit
like overreacted. I think the police and everybody overreacted and taking him in handcuffs and everything. I think the school overreacted. But I also think a lawsuit against them is ridiculous. So I think it's overreaction on both sides. I was not sympathetic to the police here because it seemed like, give me a break. It's a clock. And I was not sympathetic to the boy because I thought he overdid it. But yeah, I guess this is a good outcome in a sense that maybe it goes away finally. It's a stupid story.
Well, was it about racism really as a thing, or is it just about a school that would overreact to any of this stuff?
I think it's a school that overreacted because he was a Muslim. There's no question about that. If a white kid had brought a clock to school, nothing would have happened. Now, should you overreact because somebody's a Muslim? Sure, right? The likelihood that a kid brings a bomb to school who's a Muslim is much higher than the likelihood somebody else brings. So in a time.
Although Brad Thompson told you that a number of the kids had bomb plots planned, and that these were not just Muslim kids; these are anybody.
It's a stupid school, a school that overreacted stupidly, and probably wouldn't have overreacted if it was a white kid, but probably should.
Maybe not in Texas, right? But they should overreact if it's a white kid, right?
And I don't know if it was how. I didn't look into the story that much because it seemed stupid at the time, but I don't know how similar the clock was really to a bomb. And
apparently it looked quite a bit like a bomb
and stuff. Did it really look like a clock bomb?
Apparently it did look quite a bit like a bomb. Yeah, that was the problem.
Everybody, I think, here overreacted. And yes, this is all should just go away. It's I mean, but this is all a consequence of the fact that we don't announce, we don't say who the enemy is. We don't fight the war. We don't defeat the enemy. We don't do all the things that we're supposed to do. So this is
government, failing to protect us. So the last thing that we want to talk about then is I want to refer people to your show from the other day. It was a news briefing, but you ended up going on a bit of a welcome tangent from my perspective, but it was about American aesthetics on the occasion of the 75th anniversary of the Fountainhead and the lack of aesthetic appreciation in our country. Now, it's not like in my program notes, you're going to like the first musical selection, but I did put a Korngold violin concerto in there for people to appreciate to balance it out. I'm sure you're not a big fan of.
It's a gorgeous violin concerto. And Korngold is one of the few American composers, or at least he wasn't born in America, he was German, but he composed a lot in America. He was actually composed a lot for the movies. And so this is a 20th century beautiful romantic violin concerto written by an American, imported composer, a rare piece, a rare, beautiful piece that everybody should listen in. And it's the violinist is Hilary Hahn, who's gorgeous. So you get the added benefit of having a really,
the performance that I used to watch on YouTube has disappeared, and I don't know how to pronounce the violinist's name, but it was Stefan, and then the last name is Jaciw.
Yeah, I don't know.
And I'll be damned. I was looking, I could not find that performance anywhere. It's been taken off of YouTube.
Well,
I really enjoyed it.
Might have been the violation of copyright.
Maybe it was, but it was there for years. I couldn't
discovered suddenly.
I watched it and watched it.
If you want a good-looking guy,
no, that wasn't the point of it. It was just that was the one I had.
I would suggest Joshua Bell, who is a hunk and a wonderful violinist. And really, I love watching him play because he uses his whole body when he plays the violin. I saw a recital by him in London when I was in London. Oh. And I mean, he's a good-looking guy, and he looks much younger than he is. I called him a young guy, and supposedly he's like 50 or something. So
I would imagine being in music would be a great career for preserving sense of life and therefore looking younger. So
yeah, I think that's right. I mean, look, somebody like Chuck Pullman, who must be in his, I don't know, mid-70s, is still playing. He's still playing amazingly. So I think musicians, there's a history of musicians playing well into their 70s and 80s. Sometimes Vladimir Horowitz played the piano until very late. Toscanini conducted into his mid 80s, and keeps the mind really sharp because they're learning new things all the time. Mm-hmm. And it's hand-body coordination in addition to keep the mind sharp. So it's really good for you in terms of keeping you young. But yeah, I'm going to post on Facebook. Talk about 75th anniversary. I did 13 interviews the other day, or 12. Some of them are online, so I'll post them today online. You can watch them. One of them on NPR, and then a few on some other stations. What else? Oh yeah, I just want to mention that tomorrow I'm interviewing Greg Salamieri, and we're going to talk about selfishness, and we're going to get into some epistemological issues. And for those of you who want some deeper philosophy, Greg will provide it and help us out with it. And then next Sunday, so we'll do a show on next Saturday, and then next Sunday, I'll be interviewing Ilan Journo on his new book on how Americans should view the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So I think that'll be really interesting. And then we're doing a show, and then during the week, I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen. I know Amy's probably got a show, but I am traveling. I'm giving a talk at University of Carolina, Wilmington, on Monday, and then I'm giving. Unfortunately, these are all closed to the public. They're only students and faculty, and then I'm giving a talk at Cornell, which supposedly is going to be snowed in. So we'll see how I get there and if I get out of there. Cornell on Wednesday evening. So I'll be traveling most of this week. And following week, I will be with Dave Rubin. So that is open to public. University of Central Florida in Orlando. Fly in, drive in, come from all over Florida. It's going to be a blast. Maybe, you know, maybe we'll get some.
I have to ask you a favor about Ruben. Okay.
Yeah.
So I've been corresponding a little bit with Ben Shapiro, and Shapiro has agreed to talk to me about the Ayn Rand's philosophy is garbage comment.
Yeah.
And he said, Shapiro, that probably the most appropriate venue would be Ruben, because he said that on Ruben's show. So I've tried to one time write Ruben, if you could tell him, hey.
Yeah, I'm trying to get him to do me and Shapiro. I'll mention you as well, and
Sure.
let kind of Ben decide who, or if he wants to do both of us. Yeah, Ben has a video out responding to my video of him.
Oh, I have to go see that.
It, you know, Ayn Rand's ethics being garbage, or human relationships, or a view of human relationship being garbage. I haven't, so I'm going to try to do it this week. I'm going to do a video response to Ben's response to my response to his comment. And maybe we'll do a debate via YouTube rather than a debate face to face. We'll see. But yeah, I'll post that video with my response sometime this week.
Okay. That sounds great. I think that's it. Oh, one favor.
So the Ruben thing is not, I'm not going as a report. We're doing a live event in front of a live audience. We're hoping to live stream it. There's some issue with the university internet connection, or some issue about our ability to live stream it, but we're going to try, or Dave Rubin's going to try. So yes, I'll be with Dave Rubin. But whether it's live streamed or whether you'll have it in video afterwards, it will definitely be taped, and we'll get it up to all of you guys. But it's basically me and Dave in front of a live audience talking about the role of government and taking questions from the audience. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a blast. And I like Dave, and we get along great. And I think there'll be a good dynamic. And the audience, he interacts with the audience great. So it'll be good.
One favor, anybody who's watching on YouTube right now, if you do not subscribe to my channel, could you come on over to my channel and subscribe?
Yeah, subscribe to Amy's channel, support Amy on Patreon. Go subscribe to my channel. Go subscribe to my, support me on Patreon or PayPal. I've got now a PayPal account. What is it? PayPal.me/Yaron Brook Show. Yeah, subscriptions on YouTube are good. Amy needs to get to 1,000. So I help her get to 1,000. So a bunch of stuff in YouTube kicks in once you get to 1,000. So, so that would really help.
I need more toys.
I'm trying to get to 10,000. So help me do that. And, we'll all grow together. All right. Thanks, everybody. Good show.
Thank you so much, Yaron.
Putting the notes together and everything.
Love doing this. Love doing it. Thank you so much.
And I'll see you next week.
Excellent.
Bye, everybody.